Shakyamuni had one truth and refused again and again to teach it as one correct way to chant. 25 centuries before one teacher told you to chant fast and another told you to slow down, Shakyamuni sat in front of 1,200 of his most senior students and said the same thing. There is no one correct way. Some of them didn't call that wisdom. Some of them called it betrayal. You've felt that same accusation, even if you never called it betrayal. Under one of this channel's videos, a practitioner asked a simple question. How do you chant correctly? The first answer he got named a method. The second answer named a different one entirely. Same question, two completely different instructions, one comment section. When I ask someone how to chant correctly, he explains a method. When I ask another, he explains another. That's not one person's confusion. It's a pattern. Other viewers describe the same experience at a larger scale. Different organizations, different lineages, giving directly conflicting instruction on how the practice itself should run. So, which one is wrong? Here's the strange part. Shakyamuni's own students asked that exact question 25 centuries ago. They weren't beginners. Some of them had followed him for decades, memorized his teachings word for word, and still ended up asking exactly what you're asking right now. Shariputra sat closest to the front. He'd been practicing for decades, further along than almost anyone else in the room. Subhuti was there. So were Mahakatyayana, Mahakashyapa, and Mahamudgalyayana, the most senior circle the Buddha had. Then, Shakyamuni made an announcement that undid everything Shariputra thought he understood about his own path. There was only one true vehicle, one path to Buddhahood for everyone in that room. Later, some of them admitted exactly what that felt like. Old, feeble, certain their chance at Buddhahood was already gone. 1,200 of them had followed him for decades. Some had memorized entire sutras. And in one sentence, all of that suddenly looked like it might not have been enough. Why would learning the truth make his most devoted students feel like they'd lost everything? Shakyamuni didn't answer with more doctrine. He answered with a story about a burning house. Before the story even began, Shakyamuni turned to Shariputra directly and told him something no one expected. That he too would one day become a Buddha. Then Shakyamuni told the room a story about a father, a decaying house, and a fire no one inside could see. A wealthy man's house was old, its beams rotting, and one day it caught fire. Inside, his children kept playing, completely unaware. He called to them. They didn't understand what fire even meant. They kept playing. So the father did something that would later get Shakyamuni accused of lying. The toys you are fond of are rare and hard to obtain. If you do not take them, you will certainly regret it later. Right now, outside the house, there are 3 kinds of carts. One is yoked to a sheep, one to a deer, and one to an ox. Go play with them. Children, run out of this burning house immediately, and I will give you whatever you want. It worked instantly. The children shoved past each other to get outside, thinking only about the toys they'd been promised. But when they got outside, none of the 3 carts he'd promised were actually there. The children looked around. None of the carts they'd been promised were anywhere in sight, just their father, standing there. So they asked him directly, "Where are the carts you promised?" Their father didn't apologize or explain. What he gave them instead was something none of them had asked for. Then the affluent man saw that his children had got out safely and were sitting unharmed in an open area at a crossroads. He was relieved, happy, and joyful. The children said to their father, "Father, please give us the toys you promised, those 3 carts, one yoked to a sheep, one to a deer, and one to an ox." O Shariputra, the affluent man then gave each child the same kind of large cart. These carts were tall and spacious, adorned with various jewels, and encircled with railings full of hanging bells. On the tops of the carts were canopies also decorated with various kinds of jewels. These carts were draped with jeweled cords and hung with flower garlands. They were thickly piled with fabrics, and red pillows had been placed about. These carts were each yoked to an ox with a spotlessly white hide. These oxen had beautiful bodies with powerful muscles, even gaits, and were as swift as the wind. And there were many attendants guarding them. Every child received the exact same cart. The one meant for whichever toy they'd originally wanted made no difference at all. Which raises the obvious problem. He promised 3 different things. He delivered 1. That sounds like a lie with better packaging. Nichiren Buddhism's own commentary settles this 3 ways. The father's entire purpose was pulling his children out of a fire that would have killed them. Saving their lives is the point that makes everything else justified. There's also this. Even if he'd given them nothing at all, that still wouldn't have been a betrayal, since he never owed them anything to begin with. Giving them something worth far more than what he promised makes the accusation even harder to sustain. And then there's the plainest reason of all. Those children were too young to understand fire, let alone the value of what they were about to receive. A toy cart was the only language they could hear. Nichiren's own tradition goes one step further. The cart he promised and the cart he gave differ in more than size. One was still a provisional teaching. The other was the real thing, and even the provisional version gets set aside once the real one arrives. So the lie question is settled. But that leaves a stranger one behind it. If the cart was always going to be the same, what was the point of promising 3 different ones in the first place? Shakyamuni answered that question. This time he turned to a different disciple, Mahakashyapa, and gave him a picture instead of an argument. Picture a single storm cloud settling over an entire landscape at once. Mountains, valleys, rivers, plains, all of it under the same rain. Suppose in the great manifold cosmos there are mountains, rivers, valleys, and plains where many kinds of grasses, trees, shrubs, and herbs of different names and colors grow. Dense clouds thoroughly cover this great manifold cosmos, and rain falls at the same time everywhere, moistening the small, medium, and large roots, stems, branches, and leaves of all the grasses, trees, shrubs, and herbs. Each of these, although receiving the same moisture, reaches a greater or lesser size in accordance with their different dispositions, characteristics, and natures. The Buddha is exactly like this. One rain falling on countless different plants, and every one of them grows differently. The rain never changes. What changes is what each plant already was before the rain touched it. That's the answer to the cart question too. The 3 carts were never really about the cart. They were about meeting each child exactly where his own capacity already was. Here's what none of this has answered yet: whether any of this actually applies to the specific argument you're having right now about how fast to chant. Because doctrine about ancient vehicles is one thing, your actual practice is another. And that's exactly where Nichiren picked up this same idea 8 centuries later and made it personal. That letter is real. Nichiren Daishonin wrote it from exile on the island of Sado to practitioners asking exactly the question you're asking now. His answer centers on a word, ki. It means a person's actual capacity and disposition right now, wherever they currently stand. Even a word or a phrase of the correct teaching will enable one to gain the way, if it suits the time and the capacity of the people. But though one studies 1,000 sutras and 10,000 treatises, one will not attain Buddhahood if these teachings are unsuitable for the time and the people's capacity. Read that again. More study isn't automatically better. What matters is whether the teaching actually matches where you already are. So if guidance bends to fit the person, what happens to the teaching itself? Does that bend too? The Lotus Sutra remains the same, but if you repeatedly strengthen your resolve, your color will be better than that of others, and you will receive more blessings than they do. Nichiren compares it to dye. The same indigo dye produces cloth of wildly different depth of color, depending on how many times the cloth is dipped. The dye itself never changes. What changes is how many times the cloth gets dipped into it. This same principle shows up outside Nichiren's tradition too. In one Tibetan Buddhist lineage, a teacher changed the chanting style entirely after hearing Japanese Soto Zen monks chant in a single, unified tone, and kept the change limited to specific texts rather than the whole liturgy. Different lineages, different centuries, same underlying reason. The form exists to serve the person practicing it. Which brings us back to your actual question. When one teacher tells you to chant fast and another tells you to slow down, both instructions can be correct, just for different people at different points in their practice. Remember that comment from the start of this video. 2 answers, 2 methods, and no way of knowing which one was right. Here's the reframe. Both answers can be entirely true, and neither one has to be wrong. The teacher who told you to chant fast may have been looking at someone stuck in hesitation who needed momentum. The teacher who told you to slow down may have been looking at someone racing past the point of understanding a single word. The same goes for entire organizations giving different guidance, each one shaped by its own history and the practitioners it was actually built to serve. The real question was never which instruction is correct in the abstract. It's which one fits where you actually are right now. A stranger in a comment section can't answer that. Your own teacher, watching your own practice, actually can. So if you're asking which cart is yours, here's the actual answer. It's the one that gets you out of whatever is actually burning around you right now. Shakyamuni refused to give you one correct method because your fire isn't the same as anyone else's. Everything you need to go deeper is at NMRKOB.com, or follow the link in the description or pinned comment. 2 stories, 1 lesson. The destination was never in question. Only the road there ever was. A burning house. A single rain falling the same way on everything beneath it. Then, centuries later, one more example. A letter written from exile. Different eras, same compassion. Meet people exactly where they actually stand. If you want guidance that actually accounts for your own capacity, that's exactly what daily practice and real community are for. You'll find both linked below, along with the rest of this channel's library, if you want to keep going deeper. Whatever is burning in your own life right now, Shakyamuni already promised you a way out of it. He just never promised it would look like anyone else's.